today we are going to start with the first subject, which it's a little of a definition of what we mean by the yoga of theosophy. Both words, yoga and theosophy, have interesting meanings themselves. Today the word yoga is well known in the world, although for the most part it is associated to physical exercises. It's a particular branch of the yoga philosophy in India. In India there are 6 traditional schools of philosophy they call darshanas, which mean points of view, like 6 different approaches to reality. One of them is yoga, and there are several branches of yoga. The one that most people are familiar with is some elaboration of the Hatha yoga. Hatha yoga as a discipline is far more complex in India. We normally know only some asanas that are used to help in the physical welfare, wellness. But the word yoga itself is far more interesting and implies many other things. Same with the word theosophy. This word was probably developed, it's not really clear, but with the documents that we have in history, that word seems to have been developed by the Neoplatonists. These Greek philosophers belonged to a school that Madame Blavatsky claimed the Theosophical Society is a successor of it. So the Theosophical Society, according to Madame Blavatsky, is a successor of the Neoplatonic school. And there are several principles that are quite similar. And they use this word theosophy. Let's start with the definition of theosophy. The word theos means God, but remember that the Greeks believed in many gods. So when they used the word theos, they didn't refer to one particular only present God. The idea of theos was a God, any God. So the word Sophia is wisdom. So one of the translations of Theosophia is the wisdom that comes from a God. Maybe Athena, maybe Apollo, different gods. So from one of the translations is a wisdom that comes from a God. Later on, Christianity adopted this word to mean the wisdom from God. And they regarded prophets, for example, as theosophists. They would use this word in early Christianity because these were people that had received the wisdom of God. Now, in this particular interpretation, this wisdom is something that is bestowed upon a person by a God. That is not the definition that we normally use in the Theosophical Society, and we are going to see why. There is another interpretation of the term that has also been used historically by different people. That is wisdom in things divine, wisdom in things that belong to the gods. And again, this talks about some kind of knowledge about a particular dimension of life, of the universe. It's a wisdom in things that have to do with the gods, with the divine. This interpretation was used by Neoplatonists, was used later also by Christian theosophers. They began with Jacob Böhme in the 1600s, more or less, and they used frequently the word theosophy. Actually, I think it's a book of Gitchell, who was another theosopher that is, the title is Practical Theosophy, or I may be wrong, maybe another theosopher, Christian theosopher, but they use these words even in the title of their book around the 1700s or the 1800, earlier 1800s too. But that is again not the definition that we use in the Theosophical Society. there is a third definition or interpretation of this term, that is divine wisdom. Divine wisdom refers to some kind of wisdom that is not human, let's say. We have a human wisdom that is the result of experience, of knowledge, of the attempts of our minds to understand the world and things. But this divine wisdom is not a human wisdom, meaning it's not a wisdom that is acquired by those means. It is a wisdom that in the theosophical view, in the modern theosophical view, is a wisdom that is inherent in the divine aspect of our being, which is beyond mind, emotions, body. So there is in each human being a source of wisdom which is not human in the sense that is beyond our mind, emotions, and body, as I said. It is a wisdom that is an intrinsic part of our true nature, which is divine. So this theosophy is a state of consciousness in which the person is wise. You know, in the world there are many people with a lot of knowledge and they are not wise. There are people who are illiterate and they are wise. The property of wisdom, properly speaking, does not depend on knowledge. Knowledge may help, may prepare the ground, we are going to see all that, but the quality of wisdom is something that a person either shows or doesn't show, regardless of the amount of education. So the idea in theosophy is, and the aspiration of a theosophist, is to attain that state of consciousness of wisdom in which we are wise, that to live in that state of consciousness in which we have wisdom to deal with life, with people, with ourselves, with the circumstances. So this is the deeper meaning of the word theosophy. It's not a body of knowledge. It's not some teachings given by somebody. These are also applications of the word theosophy, and we are going to see that. But the essential meaning, the meaning that Madame Blavatsky called the theosophy of the soul, the essential meaning is this state of divine wisdom which we can awaken in ourselves. So we have there a quote by Madame Blavatsky talking about this faculty of wisdom that is beyond the mind.
The infinite cannot be known to our reason, which can only distinguish and define, but we can always conceive the abstract idea thereof, thanks to that faculty higher than our reason, intuition, or the spiritual instinct, a state in which one ceases to be the conditioned and personal I and becomes one with the all. These few characteristics of true theosophy and its practice have been sketched for the small number of our readers who are gifted with the desired intuition.
So there are two important points there that Blavatsky makes. One, that there are two sources of knowledge. One is the mind, aided by the senses, and the other is this spiritual instinct, as she was saying there, this intuition, this spiritual intuition, which is beyond the mind. Now, the Greek philosophers would say there are three levels of knowledge. One is the one that comes through the senses. You see the sun rising, your eyes see it, and the knowledge that you get from it is the idea that the earth is fixed and the sun goes around the earth. That's what you see. So there is a level of knowledge that comes directly through the senses. Then there is a level of knowledge that comes through reasoning. By exploring further this phenomenon that we see of the sun rising and drawing conclusions, understanding the motion of planets, etc., you can come to a knowledge that contradicts your senses. And you come to understand that it is not the sun that is moving, it's the earth. So you have the senses and reasoning. But both of them are limited. In the theosophical view, both of them are conditioned. Even the intellectual knowledge is heavily influenced by the senses. And the Greeks would say there is a higher knowledge than the senses and what they call opinion. There is the true reason, and by reason they use the word nous, N-O-U-S. This nous is related to the theosophical idea of spiritual intuition. So by reason they don't mean a process of thinking, they mean this insight that human beings may have into truth, by means of which, or to attain this insight, as Blavatsky says there, you need to change your state of consciousness. Because if you see in the quote, she says that to attain this state of spiritual intuition, you need to cease to see yourself as an individual separate from the rest. This divine wisdom becomes attainable, accessible, when our minds go beyond the illusion of being a separate self. Because the divine is the realm of unity. So if we are going to access this wisdom, we need to begin to perceive in that realm where there is unity. So that is what Blavatsky is saying there. There is a source of knowledge higher than the mind, and it can be attained when the person begins to perceive the unity, or perceive him or herself as part of the unity.
Knowledge comes in visions, first in dreams, and then in pictures presented to the inner eye during meditation. Thus have I been taught the whole system. Not a word was spoken to me of all this in the ordinary way, nothing taught me in writing. And knowledge so obtained is so clear that all other sources of information, all other methods of teaching with which we are familiar, dwindle into insignificance in comparison with this. One of the reasons why I hesitate to answer offhand some questions put to me in this difficulty of expressing in sufficiently accurate language things given to me in pictures and comprehended by me by the pure reason, as Kant would call it.
So here she says we are going to come back to this quote in a different context, but she's sharing with us part of her experience, and she says all this information that she's sharing with us is not the result of study, of having a teacher in the sense of somebody sitting in front of you and telling you all these things. These are valid means of knowledge. This is what we are doing now, what we do in the Theosophical Society. But all this knowledge, or this exercise in trying to reflect on these things, is a means to attain direct perception. If we don't realize this, we get confused and we think that the means is the end. Meaning we think that the aim or the goal of a good theosophist is to know theosophy, to study and learn what is in the books. That is not the goal. That is a means that will lead us to a goal that is more transcendental. So as HPV says there, the true knowledge comes by direct perception, and that's how she learned everything that she taught later. And then she says the knowledge that is attained in this state of consciousness is far more real, far more complete than anything that can be transmitted by means of words. So that is our aim. As theosophists, we work to be able, little by little, to be at home with this state of consciousness, so that we become wise people, not because we have this accumulation of knowledge, but because we are beginning to live from our spiritual nature. So the whole practice is aimed at taking us there.
Every great thinker and philosopher, especially every founder of a new religion, school of philosophy, or sect, is necessarily a theosophist. Hence, theosophy and theosophists have existed ever since the first glimmering of nascent thought made man seek instinctively for the means of expressing his own independent opinions.
So this is a second meaning of the word theosophy that we use. And it is used to talk about these two meanings, like the primary meaning was the state of consciousness. A secondary meaning is the teachings given by people who attain this state of consciousness. So there is a person that is in touch with the divine wisdom. And out of compassion, that person may begin to teach other people to help them reach that state. All these teachings that come from that state of consciousness that is the Theosophia, all these teachings can be said to be theosophical teachings because they come from that state. There is a difference between theosophy and philosophy, at least philosophy in the way that we understand it in modern times. Philosophy is the outcome of reasoning, of the mind. A philosopher, a typical Western philosopher, would sit on a chair and try to figure out some subject, some topic. How come that this is this way? And that person would start thinking and pondering over and trying to generate a system, not really knowing where he's going. He's just trying, and he generates a system that may have some aspects that are true, some others that are not true. This is why every philosopher gives, there are very well-respected philosophers that are giving us two opposite views of life. And both of them are very well-respected, very wise in their philosophy, and yet they are giving us some views that seem to be obviously incompatible. Because philosophy is the outcome of the mind, and the mind is limited, conditioned, is a tool. We need to work on to use that tool. We are going to see that. But by itself is limited and conditioned. So theosophy is not philosophy. It's not the outcome of sitting down and trying to make up an explanation of something in life. Theosophy is the true theosophy, or the true theosophical teachings are the result of this direct perception and the attempt to share those perceptions. So many times we talk about theosophy as this collection of teachings. I prefer to call them more than theosophical teachings, to make the distinction between theosophy as this state of consciousness of wisdom and the theosophical teachings that come from that. But many times we say, theosophy proposes, and by that we mean the body of teachings given by a theosophist. Now, as Blavatsky says there, of course, this state of divine wisdom is not something that the Theosophical Society owns. It's something that was there far before the Theosophical Society existed and will be there after the Theosophical Society is not there anymore. So any person that attained some, at least to some extent, this state of divine wisdom and the teachings that that person gives, they are considered to be part of theosophical teachings, part of theosophy in the Theosophical Society. So with these two definitions, what you see there in the slide, we could say that there are basically these two meanings: theosophy as a state of consciousness, and theosophy as a body of teachings given by those who attained this state of consciousness. And then in this second category, we could say there is a universal theosophy, an ancient wisdom, which is all this collected knowledge or teachings given by any theosophist since the beginning of humanity, so that we could call the ancient wisdom. And then there is a use of the word theosophy that is frequent in the Theosophical Society, that is what we call modern theosophy, meaning by that the teachings given by the theosophists that we had in the Theosophical Society. In the past, it was frequent to make a distinction between theosophists and members of the Theosophical Society. We are members aspiring to become theosophists, because a theosophist is the person that is in touch with the divine wisdom. Of course, in this work, we may have moments in which we are theosophists. We may have moments in which we are in touch with that divine wisdom that is in us. We have some insights. And the work is a work of dwelling more and more in, as I said, in our higher nature. So the word theosophy, we could say, is used in three different ways. Taking this, the state of consciousness, the teachings that have been given by all sages in the world, and more specifically, the body of teachings given by members of the Theosophical Society. So this is one of the reasons why it is so difficult to define the word theosophy, because if you talk only about one aspect of it, you are leaving aside some other aspects that are important too. If we say theosophy are the teachings given by members of the TS, then we are presenting theosophy in a dogmatic way, like we are one sect among many. If you say that theosophy is just the accumulated ancient wisdom, then what's the purpose of the Theosophical Society? You know, all the wisdom is there. The TS was very fundamental in making people aware that there is an ancient wisdom at a time when most humanity thought that whatever was ancient was primitive. The idea in the 19th century is that we were the flower of humanity with the science that was at its peak. We knew better than anybody else in the past. Therefore, everything in the past was superstition. In that environment, the Theosophical Society came and said, no, that is not true. There is a wisdom in the ancients that surpasses our own knowledge today. But today, most people are aware of that. So if theosophy would be only this accumulated divine wisdom, or wisdom, ancient wisdom, then the TS already accomplished its work and we have not much to do. Or if we say that theosophy is only the state of consciousness, then there is no need for teachings. You just have to enter into this state and all teachings are wrong. Actually, from a certain point of view, that's what our models say. In Sanskrit, Satyam Nasti Paradharma can be translated in different ways. One way we can translate it is that truth is higher than any teaching, or any teaching will always be lower than truth. Truth is always beyond any kind of teaching. Dharma is used has several meanings. We are using it in the model, in particular in the context of a spiritual teaching. So truth is always beyond any teaching. So if we focus only on that, then no teaching is necessary. But as we are going to see, the study is a means to attain that which is beyond teachings. But if it is a means for that only if we know how to use the study. Otherwise, if we use study as the aim, then we will end up just accumulating information. So that's for the word theosophy. Now let's see the word yoga. We are defining what we mean by the yoga of theosophy. So the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit. The root of the word yoga is yuj, Y-U-J, and it is related to the idea of uniting, bringing together. Not too different from a certain point of view from religion. The word religion means religare, which means to rebind, to bring together. So the word yoga means this, to join, to bring together, to gather. Now according to Panini, who was a great grammarian in Hinduism, and most of the rules of grammar are taken from him, there are two meanings or two interpretations of the word, or two contexts that give different interpretations to the word yoga. One, you have there the Sanskrit, the yuj samadau, and yujir yoga. So one of the interpretations is to concentrate, to gather. And the other interpretation, the second one, is to unite. They are slightly different. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which is a very important literature in India, it's a collection of aphorisms that form the basis for an important school of yoga, the Raja Yoga, which is a yoga in which meditation is very important. In these Yoga Sutras, Patanjali uses the word yoga in the sense of gathering or concentrating. In traditional yoga, there is not the aim of uniting. Actually, the aim is separating. Traditional yoga is based on another school of Hinduism that is called Samkhya, which is a dualistic school. There is the idea that you have spirit and you have matter. In the manifested world, spirit and matter are mixed up, and the spirit is confused because of this intermixed with matter. So the process of yoga, what yoga tries to do is to separate the spirit from matter, to isolate the spirit from matter, and that is moksha, liberation from the realm of matter. So technically speaking, what the Hindu yoga tries to do is to separate these two principles. And you do that by gathering all the faculties in consciousness and concentrating them in a particular object of meditation, because it is only when you gather all these faculties and the mind is unified that you can see reality. So it is like if the mind was this kind of glass that has its own motion. If this glass has its own motion, you cannot really see what is out there. So what you need to do is to steal those glasses so that you can see without distortion. So that is the idea. The idea in yoga is the way you do that is by gathering all these faculties of the mind that are restless all over the place. You gather them, you steal them, and then you can see reality. Now that is not the meaning of yoga that for the most part we use in Theosophy. Of course, many times if we are talking about meditation, we may use that meaning in particular. But in Theosophy there is the idea that we are all one originally, and for cosmic processes, this oneness appears to be separated, to be fragmented. And at some point in evolution, the fragment of the one forgets completely that it is a fragment and believes that it is a unity in itself. This is what happens to us. We think we are this person and we have no idea, maybe we have certain idea at the level of knowledge, but we have no idea that we are the whole, that I am this body as much as I am any of those bodies. Same for you. You are that body as much as you are this body. So the idea in Theosophy is that yoga is the reunification of this consciousness that seems to be fragmented. So we can talk about this union in several ways. The union of the lower consciousness and the higher consciousness. The union of the fragment with the unity, with the wholeness behind. And that is the way we use it for the most part in Theosophy. So we could say that the yoga of Theosophy is this path to union which can be accomplished by awakening this divine wisdom in us. Because the divine wisdom is the perception of reality, this reality that is a union. So it's a path of yoga that is, or a path to union that is based on right perception, on right understanding. And by understanding, I don't mean only intellectual, by right view. So as you see, the Theosophical Society could be classified among those paths that are related to wisdom. You know, in Christianity you had originally, in early Christianity, the Gnostics. Gnosis means wisdom too. And their path, their Christian path, was heavily based on wisdom, on attaining this state of divine wisdom that they call gnosis. The other school of Christianity that eventually is the one that took over and spread around is more based on faith. It's more based on humility, love, faith, surrender. So it's a path that is not based on knowledge. It's not based on wisdom. And the church, as a consequence of that, has many times persecuted knowledge and wisdom because intellectual knowledge challenges faith. So you can see how there is a problem there. So there are some paths that are based on faith, some paths are based on wisdom, some others are based on action. I think we could say, although theosophy is all-encompassing, I think the keynote of theosophy is wisdom, which is there in the very meaning of its word or the term. So let's see now the foundations, why this is the case, why this path is in this way.
The truths and mysteries of occultism constitute, indeed, a body of the highest spiritual importance, at once profound and practical for the world at large. Yet, it is not as a mere addition to the tangled mass of theory or speculation in the world of science that they are being given to you, but for their practical bearing on the interests of mankind. Mahatma K.H.
So Mahatma K.H. was one of the inspirers of the founding of the Theosophical Society. He was one of Blavatsky's teachers. He's a person, we could say today, an enlightened being. The word is a little vague, but let's use it. A person that was completely in touch with the divine wisdom. And part of what he and others that belong to his community wanted to do is to help the West to regain this path to the realization of divine wisdom that has always been there. If you see the mystics of any tradition, in some way or the other, they are part of this path of realizing the divine wisdom. And this is why, again, most mystics had problems with the church, because the mystical, in the way that the Christian church has developed, the mystical path is not really compatible with how it has traditionally developed. In the mystical path is, again, a path of knowledge, I would say higher knowledge, in the sense that not necessarily a lot of information, but this union with the divine that comes from attaining the right perception. So the idea is that what the Mahatma K.H. is saying is that there is a lot of knowledge that is given through the Theosophical Society, but the purpose, the ultimate purpose of that knowledge is not to create a new school of philosophy. It's not to give a worldview so that we can be happy with these explanations about the world. The aim is that by means of these teachings, we can transform our lives, that we can live in a different way. So as I said yesterday, if you are a person that is attracted to understanding, it's very easy to get lost in the study because it is wonderful. If you have a tendency to that, it is wonderful and you can spend your whole life studying the theosophical literature, and you will never know everything, even know everything that is in the books, let alone what is beyond words. But we don't have to forget that the aim of knowledge is so that we can live differently, that we can be, as we are going to see, factors of transformation in our lives and in the world. And I think that's the foundation of why we are doing all this.
Some say that in order to attain Raja Yoga, one should investigate Mahavakya. Others that the mind must be concentrated on a point and the yogi must contemplate Parabrahman. But Some say one's own guru is the true subject of contemplation, and it is enough to lead a good life. Some say the repetition of pranava is in itself Raja Yoga, and others say it must cultivate willpower. Which of these is the true one? All these are necessary and much more. Read Light on the Path. T. Subaru.
So Subaru was a disciple of the same master or teacher that Blavatsky had. And he's saying there, how do we get to this union with the divine? And he says, some say you have to study the Mahavakyas, which are like aphorisms in Vedanta. You are Brahman, you are the whole, for example, and a few others. Or that you have to repeat pranava, which is the Om. Or that you have to be devoted to your guru and meditate on your guru and just, your guru will take care of everything. So he talks about the different paths and says which one is the right one. And then he says all of them and much more. And this is the characteristic of the Theosophical yoga. It is a holistic approach. There are, in the Theosophical view, there are no shortcuts to attaining this union. You won't attain this union merely by repeating a mantra, by watching your breath, by believing in a person, by visualizing a color. No trick can take you to realizing the ultimate truth of the universe. It would be even, humoristic that the whole complex universe and the whole complex process of life could be accomplished by any of these tricks. Go bathe in the Ganges and then you can be enlightened. And this is something that all philosophers have struggled against. Shankaracharya, one of the founders of Advaita Vedanta, which is one of the schools in Hinduism, he would say the cause and the effect have to be connected. If the problem is that you don't perceive the divine, or the divine nature, Parabrahman, which is this absolute nature, then the cause that will solve that problem has to be connected with that. How, breathing or repeating a mantra or doing any action has nothing to do with your state of ignorance, of spiritual ignorance. To be able to transcend the spiritual ignorance, you have to do something that points out to wisdom directly. So he says any action, any of these things that you may do, the aim is to purify the mind, but they don't bring liberation by themselves. So in the Theosophical view, we are going to see this. We need to relate to the spiritual path in a very holistic way. All the different aspects of our personality have to be taken into account. This is why normally we talk about in the Theosophical Society about the need for study, but that is not enough. The need for meditation, but that is not enough. The need for service, that is not enough. None of these paths by themselves are going to take us to the aim. All of them together will generate this holistic approach. So in some schools of Buddhism, for example, and Hinduism too, especially in the way that we know them in the West right now, there is a very strong emphasis on meditation. Like you just meditate and you can attain the aim of human life. So you retire from the world, you spend 12 hours meditating, and then you can attain liberation. In the Theosophical view, that is not true. That is not going to lead you to liberation. Meditation is very important, along with other things that are also very important. And that's what we are going to see. Mm-hmm. So Subaru says, read Light on the Path for this particular point. This is the quote that he was referring to.
Seek out the way. Seek it not by any one road. To each temperament there is one road which seems the most desirable, but the way is not found by devotion alone. by religious contemplation alone, by ardent progress, by self-sacrificing labor, by studious observation of life. None alone can take the disciple more than one step onward. All steps are necessary to make up the ladder, light on the path.
It is interesting, besides the point that all these aspects are necessary and can take us only so far by themselves, it is interesting how it begins. It says, to each temperament, there seems to be one path that is the right one. So if we are intellectual, study is pleasant, we feel drawn to it, and there is a tendency to claim that this is the way you are a good theosophist if you study, if you know. If not, you are a second-rate theosophist. Or if we are devoted people that have devotion, then we may have the tendency to say, why are you getting entangled with the mind? All knowledge is limited. You don't need the mind. You just need love and compassion and devotion, and that will take you there. Or if we are practical people, you will say, no, what is needed is to do something. Study is useless. You need to do something. And devotion also, you are just in your room loving the deity. We need to do something. And we tend to try to justify the paths that are natural to us because they feel comfortable. Now, the fact that they are natural to us means that we have already developed that particular quality. And it is precisely the ones that are not natural to us that we should be paying attention, because those are the ones that we need to develop. In the theosophical view, in order to be able to realize the divine nature of everything, we need to be able to develop in a holistic way, because any aspect of our nature that is not developed becomes a blind spot. So we should be very careful to claim that what feels more natural to us, what we are good at, is the path that everybody should lead, or even ourselves. So obviously we have a tendency. This personality may have an intellectual tendency, a practical tendency, devotion, and that's perfectly fine. But we should be careful, if we are serious about this, not to enclose our activity only to that aspect that is natural to us. And pay attention so that within your devotion, you develop knowledge and you develop an attitude of service. Within your service, you develop the knowledge and wisdom to serve well, and you do it out of love. Or within your intellectual approach, that you develop devotion and that you become active and healthy. So we need to try to develop in a holistic way. So that is the foundation of this yoga. As I said, the idea of the holistic approach, I think, is something very fundamental in the yoga of theosophy that is not, at least how you can see today most religious paths. There are very few that are as holistic as theosophy. Most religious paths as we know them today, originally they were not like that, but as we know them today, and especially in the West, maybe in their original setting they are different, but today they seem very fragmentary. They seem, because people want something fast, easy, a good promise, you just do this and attain liberation, they tend to fragment the approach. I think theosophy is very unique in that way. So let's see now the goal. What are we striving for in this yoga?
The way to begin to tread the path that leads to the place of peace is to endeavor to identify our consciousness with the true self. And the means are disengagement from the objects of the senses, carelessness as to results, and meditation, ever renewed on the true self. Annie Besant.
So I think if you read from different theosophical leaders, the goal is to realize the true self, which is the one universal self. There are different goals in different traditions. For example, the Gnostics would say that the world is a prison. In the Gnostic view, this world is a result of a flawed God. He was flawed,
Flawed.
yeah, a limited and conditioned God, and this world is a cosmic mistake. It was not meant to be created. It was created by a God that thought he was the highest, and he was actually one of the lowest gods. And therefore, our divine spark is here in a prison, and Christ has to come to rescue us. So the aim of the Gnostic life is to be able to get out of this prison. And there is an aspect of truth there. Matter acts as a prison for the spirit from a certain point of view. But if you think this is a prison, then life in itself is not necessarily valuable. What you have to do, this is after all a prison, don't stay just decorating the prison. Just try to break away, break free from the prison. The problem with that view is that it may tend to regard life as something that is an obstacle more than a means. There are some other views. In the typical Hindu and Buddhist view, there is the idea that this is an illusion. And again, not necessarily a purposeful illusion. There is, now after Aurobindo in Hinduism, the idea of evolution was brought back into the Hindu view. But traditionally, the, let's say, exoteric view of Hinduism and Buddhism, they didn't have the concept of evolution. We are here on earth because of our desires. Our desires are bringing us once and again to earth. And we are in this illusion because we desire. So what we have to do to be able to break the illusion is to stop desiring. And what best way to stop desiring than go into the forest where you are not exposed to objects and where you can try to go into meditation and separate yourself from the world. So again, there are a lot of true aspects in this view, but again, the problem in this view is that it takes life as being an obstacle. In the theosophical view, life is seen more like with the Neoplatonists. As I said, Blavatsky said, the Theosophical Society is like a successor of this view. There was a typical controversy between the Gnostics and the Neoplatonists. The Gnostics were saying this is a mistake. The Neoplatonists would say there is no possibility of mistake in a universe that is ruled by law, a law that is the expression of the Logos. Logos means reason, order. So intelligence permeates the whole universe. So there is no possibility of a mistake. The earth, the body is not a mistake. It is true that it acts as a prison for the soul, but they would say there is a purpose here. It's a purposeful prison. Maybe we could say it's like high school. You have to go to high school. You don't want to go there. You don't want to stay there all your life, but you have to go through it. So life is not the embodied life. It's not the ultimate aim. You don't want to stay embodied forever. But there is a purpose why we come to life. So life is a school. And that is the view in the theosophical approach. Life is a school. Therefore, life itself is not an obstacle. Life is the means by which we can attain the ultimate aim. And that ultimate aim, as Anibesan says there, is union with the universal self.
If man, by suppressing, if not destroying, his selfishness and personality, succeeds in knowing himself as he is behind the veil of physical Maya, he will soon stand beyond all pain, all misery, and beyond all the wear and tear of change. Such a man will be physically of matter. He will move surrounded by matter, and yet he will live beyond and outside it. This may be achieved by the development of unselfish universal love of humanity and the suppression of personality or selfishness, which is the cause of all sin and consequently of all human sorrow. HPB.
So normally modern sensitivities don't like words like suppressing, destroying the self, selfishness and all this. But if you with time try, you realize that, or at least this is what I think, you may perceive it in a different way, but to me that is a very accurate way of talking about things. Selfishness is just a wrong idea. Destroying selfishness is not destroying our mind, destroying this center of consciousness. Destroying selfishness is destroying the idea that you are just this, that you are just this body, this mind, these emotions. As Blavatsky says there, when a person realizes the true nature, that person is still in a body, in the world, can deal with the world. It's not a rejection of all this, but it is done from a place of wisdom that takes the person beyond the causes of sorrow, which is selfishness. So what we need to do is to destroy selfishness, to suppress selfishness, not in the sense of the psychological repression, we are going to see that, but to get beyond the false idea that I am this little fragment when we are the whole. Now, here there is another danger. In the New Age, there is the Theosophical teachings began saying we are gods. Now, the New Age tends to interpret it in the opposite way that Theosophy means it. If I say I am God, normally in the New Age it is interpreted that I, Pablo, am God. That's obviously not true. Pablo is here and is not there. Pablo doesn't have, he's not omniscient, he's not omnipresent, omnipotent. Pablo is obviously not God. What I mean when I say I am God is I am not Pablo, I am God. I am the one, therefore I am not this little fragment. So all these teachings are really esoteric teachings because they are very subtle, even if they seem simple. And the problem with the esoteric teachings throughout humanity is that when they are misunderstood, they produce the opposite effect. So many times the idea I am God, if it is not understood in the right way, intensifies the selfishness. Now I think I am God, that the whole world should be around me, that I can make manifest whatever I want, that everything should, be the way that I want it, because this is my divine right, birthright, or whatever. That is the whole opposite to what the Theosophical teachings are talking about. So the idea I am God is I have to realize that this Pablo is just an expression of the oneness, that I am the oneness, and the more I realize I am the oneness, the less I am concerned with this particular fragment. If you think you are only one of your fingers, then you will fight all the other fingers defending this one. If you realize that all the fingers are you, how will you choose one over the other? All of them are you. So the more we realize we are the one universal self, you stop choosing yourself over some other person, because the sense that I am this begins to weaken more and more, and you don't need to fight to protect one particular fragment when you feel that you are all the fragments. And this happens even in the family. The family is a very simple example. A good parent would sacrifice himself or herself for the children because there is this sense of unity, and it's only natural. So the same happens as we get more in touch with the idea, the perception that we are the whole.
God dwells within all, and there is only one self within which we are all rooted. You must realize your unity not only with those to whom you are naturally drawn, but also with the outcast, the sinner, the criminal. There lies your way of progress, no separation, Annie Besant.
And this is another important aspect of unity. Normally, again, there are interesting and valuable things in the New Age, but I normally take it, as a contrast of some of the Theosophical teachings, just for the purpose of an example, and so that we can see clearly some things that sometimes we may fall into. But in the New Age, many times the idea of unity is related only to what is pleasant, what is beautiful, there is a reason there, because it's easier to feel in union with a beautiful flower than with a nasty person. So it is obvious. But again, try thinking that you are one with all that is beautiful is still being completely conditioned by the personal self that is always choosing pleasure over what it calls pain or unpleasant feelings. So as long as we keep living based on what is pleasant and what is unpleasant, we are living feeding that personal self. What we need to do is the opposite, is to begin to realize that state of consciousness in us, which is beyond pain and pleasure. And the more we realize that as our true nature, and all this is possible, and we are going to see some practices for this. Of course, it is a process, this happens little by little in general, but the more we realize we are in touch with that state in ourselves, that is a state of peace, harmony, that can be there even if there are unpleasant feelings, the more we realize this state, the more we go beyond the prison of the personal self. So Annie Besant says there, the unity has to include everything, the pleasant and the unpleasant, because unity means all, not only that which I like. So same with, if you have negative feelings, a typical approach in the New Age is breathe in peace and breathe out all your anger. So then we are polluting the psychic atmosphere. Get all the beautiful things and pour out all your garbage. That again, there is a reason why, and it's okay if you start there, but we need to move beyond that. And eventually, the ideal of the theosophist is to be a transformer, and on the contrary, bring all the suffering in the world, and by means of your state of peace and harmony, you transform that suffering into vibrations of peace and harmony and love. That is what we want to do, not the opposite. The opposite is, again, self-centered. It's trying to make this little fragment feel better, when we want to, ideally, little by little, to do the opposite. So I think we can stop here. We can do some question and answers. We have 10 more minutes, is that correct? So, yeah.
I just wanted to add something just to kind of not clarify, but express it a little more, that everyone has a starting place. If you're not an academic, or you're not, it wasn't something that was an affinity to you all your life, the New Age is really the only place to start. It's the only thing, it's everywhere, it's out there. And to start with the New Age is not a bad starting point, and eventually it gets to the point where you realize, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And that realization for me came when I watched the movie The Secret, and this guy in there fell down on his knees and cried because he had made a poster where he wanted a house, and then that house came to him, his $5 million house, and he was so grateful to the universe. And I thought, wait a minute, this is not right. And, excuse me, so what I actually did was I went back to the beginning of the video, and I slowed it down because the woman in it talks about a book that she found mysteriously. And I found, if you slow it down, you can almost glimpse that book, and I found that book. And it's just an essay a woman wrote back in the early 1900s, and you could tell it's a Victorian writer. She was a Victorian woman, because she talks about her servants. And the ideas that are within that essay in itself are so completely different from what The Secret is. So you can see where just the examples Pablo gave, these simple ideas morphed into a more selfish tone. But the New Age movement itself does have some benefits.
Yeah, I also got to the TS through the New Age, and that's many times the path. The New Age has 3 lines of origin. anything that is more the more esoteric part of the New Age, and again, many times that esoteric understanding is quite superficial, but all that came from the TS. The idea of the affirmations and decrees and all that came from what originally was the movement of Christian Science, which then morphed into mental science, and then the New Thought movement. And then some part of the New Age, or some influences come from the Transcendentalists in the US, Emerson and other people. When you see the New Thought movement at its very beginning, it was far more spiritual. The affirmations were to attain spiritual virtues. But as time passes, because the new Thought movement really started by being concerned with the fragment, not with the whole. The idea was how to make myself, this personal self, happier. And at the beginning, the way they thought is by stimulating spirituality, but it was still self-centered. Because of that origin, in time, these affirmations became more and more materialistic. And they, at the very beginning, they would never try to do affirmations to get more money or a house, a car, a wife, or whatever. They were all about peace and love and all these things. So it's interesting to see how, without the proper foundations, we tend to morph any spiritual movement and bring it back to the self-centeredness. And that happens with religions too.
That also happened with the Greek philosophy. If you look at their meaning of happiness, or what they felt was eudaimonia, it's nothing what happiness to us today is. So anything can be taken.
Yeah, today for us, happiness is pleasure. For them, for example, Aristotle, for him, happiness was the sense of fulfillment, when you did something that was well done or that was worth doing, even if in doing that there was a lot of struggle and discomfort and suffering. If it was worth doing, at the end of the process you look back and you have this sense of fulfillment. That was happiness.
Right. And happiness, the word didn't even come around until after the 14th century. So that's the eudaimonia, like I said, is the word that they use, and it literally means, I think, fulfillment.
Yeah, flourishing, sometimes they try. Eu is true, daimonia is...
I think you're right in flourishing.
Yeah, that's how they normally translate it. Eu means true, and daimonia refers to this spirit, like what we would call now the higher self. So eudaimonia is like the true spirit in us. So when that expresses, that is happiness, or that was the concept of happiness with the Greeks.
Okay, so
Any concept? Yeah. Any comments or questions? Yeah.
Excuse me. There also
Can you wait for because we are recording? Yeah.
That explanation that you just gave there, I understand too, is really the definition of service rather than doing stuff, but fulfilling that sort of purpose within yourself that makes you feel that way, not doing it because of commitment, duty, responsibility, but actually doing it from that higher self.
Yes, and we are going to discuss a whole class about service, and that's the idea. Same with sacrifice. Sacrifice is normally thought to be something painful that we do because we want to please the deity, or we want to, for whatever reasons. Sacrifice originally comes from the word like a sacred office, a sacred deed. And the problem is that the more selfish or self-centered we become, all these sacred offices or sacred deeds that normally have to do with the whole, they feel painful if we are self-centered. So the word sacrifice develops in that sense.
Thank you for your talk. I've certainly learned a lot from it. I wanted to ask about moksha, liberation. Liberation from the self separating from the non-self. and this is to create bliss or ananda. And are you saying that's kind of on the path of oneness? And it's a very blissful experience. Well, it's bliss. Where does that fit?
Yes, I wouldn't say that like the aim is to feel bliss. I would say a consequence of the process is to feel bliss. Now, in the theosophical view, there are three aspects to reality. We have self, we have no-self, or the non-self, and we have what Blavatsky would call the beingness. So you have a being, the non-being, and the beingness. The beingness is what is behind both self and non-self. The beingness is the unity that is behind self and non-self. This idea of self and non-self is many times based on a dualistic philosophy, which is perfectly fine, but in the theosophical view, there is always an emphasis on the third element, the element that unites. So part of the process of realizing this beingness that encompasses both self and non-self implies a separation of the two. But that separation is like in alchemy, there is like an aphorism that says, before you have to unite, you have to separate. The problem is that the universal self is expressing through each one of us, the one universal self. The result of the universal self expressing through this body is the idea of an individual self in an individual body. But both the idea of individual self and the non-self that would be the body, both are wrong. The foundation for that is the universal self. So what we really want to do is to transcend the whole duality. However, before we do that, this individual self, which is an illusion because it's really the universal self expressing in this individual body, but let's say this individual self that is constantly identified with the fragment has to separate itself from that fragment so that it can realize that this is only a fragment. When that separation happens, then the individual self realizes I'm not an individual, I am the whole. So it's like, to use an example that, or an allegory that Krishnamurti gave, he said if there is a carpet and you are always looking at the corner of the carpet, and somebody comes and tells you that corner is part of a greater carpet that is the whole, and you say, yes, it makes sense, but I have never looked at the whole carpet and I don't know how to, I'm always looking at the fragment. So first you have to stop looking at the fragment so that you can look at the whole. So the separation between self and non-self is a preliminary step for the perception of the unity. But what really entails the ultimate aim of life is the realization of the unity, not just the separation of the two.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, tea time.
Okay.